So I'm Mark Curfey, and I guess I had the kind of evening slot. This whole presentation originally started in the States as an after-dinner speaking slot, so it's not a kind of formal speaking thing. And the way it'll work is that there's a whole bunch of topics, and I will just talk about the topics, and hopefully we'll get some heckling, interruptions, whatever. I'm free with it all. Once people get through the second round of beers, I'm sure everyone will get even more lively. Anyone Japanese in here? No? Does anyone know what that means? Top line. Pechakucha is this Japanese way of doing these speeches. I went to this security conference in the States, and the speaker spent the first 15 minutes introducing himself and reading line by line about himself. So I decided there's a whole better way to do it. So for those of you who can't tell, I'm British. I lived in America and I lived in Atlanta, and the people used to go, "You're not from around here, boy, are you?" I used to stick up a slide like that. It soon figured it out. Being British is not necessarily a good thing today, of course. At this point, I have a 1 in 2 chance of some nasty person sending all my personal data around the world. This man is called Alistair Darling, and he is far from the darling of the British people right now, let me tell you. It's kind of a bizarre thing in England. So if you've ever been to England, you know that we are the most watched country on earth, right? We have more video cameras everywhere. We have more X-ray stuff at all the airports. So I can only propose that what we're trying to look for is some guy like this. It's going to be an X-ray of Homer, right? Who was it that decided to stick 25 million people's personal data on 2 disks and stick it in the regular mail? It had to only have been Homer, right? It's kind of bizarre. But it gives me a general reminder about life. So I think Bruce Schneier came up with this quote first, right? It's like, if you think technology is the solution to the problem, you don't understand the problem in the first place, because that whole stuff has been around for ages. There was no reason why that should have been done like that. It's just downright ridiculous. So in case you hadn't figured out, are we able to dim the lights of the presentation? I don't know. Maybe.
Total darkness.
Whoa, total darkness and beer, that may not be a good idea.
Would you like to see how it works?
Just dim them, I'm sure it'll be fine. So here's the intro about me. So as you can tell, I enjoy beer. I enjoy sharing beers with other people. Cheers. I had a misspent youth. I drank too much beer and thought I was going to be a musician. It was an awful time when you wake up with a hangover and realize that you're an absolute crap musician. So I had to go get a job. I went to this place in the UK. Anyone read the Da Vinci Code? A bunch of people. You were there as well? Fantastic. Good man. So Royal Holloway is a fantastic place. Sophie Neveu, the French cryptographer, was educated there. I was there back in the 90s. We used to spend a lot of time up here on the 3rd floor, which is the girls' dorm room, but we won't go into that after a few beers. You get to drink a lot of beer at Royal Holloway, as you will well know, down the student union every night. There you go. Good man, he's already halfway through his first. You can tell he was there. He's a genuine article. I then went to work in London, City of London, for a whole bunch of time. Whoop. So spent some time in London working for a bunch of investment banks. Oh, that's fine. That's good. Yay. I can still see my beer. There is no hope of that. I think there was someone at the back who was a gentleman who had lots of blusher on as well, so I can no longer see him, which is absolutely fantastic as well. So I spent a bunch of time in the City of London. Decided to go join a small startup called ISS. Moved to Atlanta. Had some good success at ISS. I joined in kind of relative early days. Decided I was living in Atlanta. My wife is from Trinidad, so if anyone's been to the south of the States, you probably understand that someone from Trinidad is not necessarily the best place to be. So I decided to go basically take a retirement job at Charles Schwab in San Francisco. For anyone who knows what Schwab is, Schwab's one of the biggest financial services companies in the States. We had $1 trillion of assets in a database in a big mainframe. So if you think about that, that's 1,000 billion amount of money. It's a damn lot of money, and you've got to figure out how to do this security stuff. It kind of puts a new perspective on it. My retirement job at Schwab became completely anything but. I started on October the 1st. On October the 3rd, we were on the front page of the Wall Street Journal for a security violation. So it was absolutely fantastic. The CIO came walking down the corridor. He goes, "Oh, I hear you're the new man who's going to fix all this problem." Well, great. 2 days in, it wasn't my problem. But essentially what I did at Schwab is I was responsible for building the security program. So getting all of the developers, 3,500 developers, we just had a ginormous infrastructure. We had people all around the world, people in Russia, people in the States, obviously, people in India. And fantastic company, and I kind of cut my teeth on learning software security there. During that time, I started this whole open web application security thing, and then decided to go join another startup. Anyone heard of Foundstone? Hacking Exposed books. So I joined them in about 2002. The idea was to take the experience learned at Schwab and go deploy some of those things, how to build security programs in large organizations. We sold that company to McAfee in 2004. Everyone had to stick around for 2 years. My stock vested on November 1st last year, and I left on November 2nd. So you can figure out what I thought about that company, right? Got to drink a bit of champagne. Life revolves around alcohol, in case you hadn't figured it out. So I decided then to move to France. Any French people here? Yeah. One French person, there you go. Not on strike today? No. So I've been living in France for about a year at this point, and I get to do this instead of drinking beer. Life is fantastic. France drives you mad for anyone who lives there. I've had a holiday house there for quite a long time, but I've only lived there for about a year, and nothing works. If my DSL breaks, it takes 2 weeks for someone to come out and decide whether they're going to fix it, and then 2 more weeks for the guy to actually turn up. Literally, it's 4 weeks to get my DSL fixed. It absolutely and utterly drives you mad. So 6 weeks ago, I decided to join Microsoft. I'd basically had pretty much about a year off. And most of my friends send me pictures like this. so I put it up so you don't have to bother creating your own. And it is absolutely true that when you join, the little chip that goes in the back of your neck doesn't hurt at all. So if anyone's considering joining, don't worry about it. So that's my intro. So like I said, I'm going to pick a whole bunch of topics. And the first topic is about how applications get built in the real world. So this is my experience. So at Foundstone, we used to have a lot of customers who would come to us and say, "Hey, can you build software development life cycles, do the same sort of stuff you did before?" And the naive approach was to say, how do you build software? And then say, okay, let's layer a whole bunch of security stuff onto that. This is what I discovered. The customer asks for this. The project manager interprets it like this. The business analyst interprets it like this. Anyone work for a Big Four? Not going to admit it now, right? Big Four guy comes in and says that. Developer decides to write this. Project gets documented like this. Operations install this. Gets billed like this. Supported like this. And what the customer really wanted was a swing, right? It's the same thing as up front. But it was quite an eye-opener for me, because what I used to do was used to say, how do you build software? And people would sit down and they'd tell, oh, we use the RUP, or we use this. Oh, here are all the touch points for that. And we used to build all this documentation and all this process. And then you realize that the shit doesn't work. Because what they supposedly build software, no one does that in the real world, right? And this is how real-world software gets built. So that was an eye-opener. And what I learned about that is that what you've got to do is figure out how software really gets built in organizations and not how people tell you it gets built. And those two things are completely different. So I think one of the fundamental problems that we have is a breakdown in communication. So this is a true story. So in the Second World War, there was this frigate trawling through, and on the horizon they see a light. And that light is right in their shipping lane. So you know what this whole kind of law of shipping is. The biggest ship doesn't have to move, the smallest ship has to move. So the guy gets on the radio, he says, I'm Commander so-and-so. I demand that you move, you're in my shipping path. The guy at the other end turns around and he says, oh, it's very interesting, but he said, I'm the commander of this ship, I demand you move. At this point, this guy starts getting a little livid, right? He's like, no, you don't seem to understand. I'm the commander of this big, really important ship. I absolutely demand that you move. And so the pissing match starts, right? This guy then turns around, and he goes, you know what? He said, I demand you move because I'm a lighthouse. So it's a true story. The ship ran aground, right? The ship genuinely ran aground. And why I think it's interesting from a security perspective is if you think how humans communicate over life and death issues, and then you think how they communicate security, it's pretty frightening. Absolutely frightening. And I think an awful lot of the issues and the things particularly I've seen in building corporate applications is because people don't communicate well what they want in terms of security. This is another classic example, right? I'll let you read that one for yourself while I have a beer. And say, oh, you have to protect yourself from a Smurf attack. What the fuck does that mean? It's bizarre, right? All right, so 2 topics down. I think there's about 10 topics to go. Half a beer down, so about a 3-beer talk, I reckon. So this stuff drives me mad, and it's driven me mad for a while. Sales and marketing stuff. Everyone needs to sell stuff, right? Everyone needs to market it. I have no issues with that. I work for Microsoft, right? Be hypocritical. But when I see things like this, it absolutely utterly drives me mad. This guy published a bunch of stuff on his blog, gets picked up by a whole bunch of Google alerts, everyone starts talking about it, starts getting reported in the press. This guy basically took the Firefox code base, ran it through a static code analysis tool, and basically came to the conclusion that Firefox is absolutely utterly hosed. It's kind of interesting. So this guy basically takes this stuff. He says, okay, so the original guy said there were 611 defects, 71 vulnerabilities found in Firefox, and he takes it to task. What he basically did is he discovered that it was this. Out of the 611 original defects and the 72 supposed vulnerabilities, actually 3 of them were real bugs. So if I was a statistician, I would come to this conclusion. The bloke who ran the tool, who worked for the company, his tool was 95.5% useless. Because 95.5% of the things that you claim were security issues in the first place actually weren't. And this stuff happens all the time. So I think that's a huge problem around the marketing stuff. Look at this as another example. Less than 1% false positives. I'll let you draw your own conclusions. How do you... Half of the stuff from the press. Few ethical hackers can provide simulated attacks with the level of sophistication that Sensic offers in its Hailstorm hacker-in-a-box penetration testing tool. It's like, okay, so let me either hire David Tell or use Hailstorm. Let me think about this one. Ooh, tough decision, right? It's kind of crazy. And all of this stuff as well, you see some of these things that get written up, and they're written up as kind of research papers, but at the end of the day, all they are is advertising stuff, right? So if you look at the way this thing was done and look at what they actually analyzed, there's no science behind what they did whatsoever. They basically took a canned application in a lab, pointed a tool at it. Those tools are designed to be running a canned application in a lab, and that's the way they work. So I think the whole kind of sales and marketing stuff is a real problem. And I love this quote from Wayne Gretzky. So Wayne Gretzky's the ice hockey player in the States, Stanley Cup guy. So, you know, you miss 100% of the shots you never take, right? It's the same with looking for security issues. You know? If you can't find where the issue is in the first place, you've got no hope in hell of finding it. And half of those tools don't understand where the issues are in the first place. So if you ever want to run one of those web scanning tools across a website, what I recommend you do is build something like an HTTP module, stick it in front of all the URLs, and see how much it finds. They don't find half of the stuff. So it's quite compelling. This stuff's happening all the time as well, right? I guess the Security 3.0 conference is going down the hall there. Hamster wheels of pain. Oh, they drive me mad. And that's from someone who Foundstone had a hamster wheel of pain. We created a hamster wheel of pain, and it was like, you could see these sales guys like, oh, what you do? All you've got to do is follow the circle, sir, and everything's going to be fine. It's great. It's absolute and utter craziness. And just about every large company now has got a hamster wheel of pain, right? So people are going to start falling off the hamster wheels of pain before long. One of the other issues I kind of see is culture. And so maybe I come at this from a slightly different angle. So when I was at Schwab, I was paid by the corporate information security team, but I literally picked my office up and moved it into the development team because the security department was not necessarily well perceived. And I see this all the time, right? You go across corporate America, you talk to the security people, they tell you you're doing a fantastic job building this great security program. You go talk to the developers, and they go, security people, right? All they do is say no to everything. And it's a massive problem with culture around how the security teams aren't giving the appropriate advice and all the counseling to all the dev teams. I mean, I bet there's a poll here. How many people are developers versus security people? Hold your hand up if you're a developer. Yeah. Developers for security people? Or Paul put his hand up. You're a security person. You don't work in a dev team? Oh. Okay, well, that's fantastic. I conclude this, right? My wife told me to read that book years ago. I never bothered. I'll probably get home tomorrow and find I'm from Mars or something. I don't know. So I think this is so true, right? It's like there's a massive gap between the things that software developers care about and the things that necessarily security people care about, and it shouldn't be the case. I'm pleased to say it's not the case at Microsoft, which is one of the compelling reasons why I came on board. But what I find really strange about this whole web application security space, and I'm not talking about the application security space like, Halver and FX and David Tell, all this sort of stuff. I'm talking about the web app type space here. But, I really find it strange that there's people giving advice about how to build enterprise web apps who have never written web apps. They've come from a network space and they understand HTTP, and they tell you all this advice about how to deal with it. And it's kind of concerning. But it's definitely true, and there's a lot of people who really understand HTTP very well, and that's absolutely fantastic. But they're giving advice about how to build enterprise web application architectures, and the stuff just wouldn't scale. So I can give you examples of when I've worked in financial services companies before. People have said, hey, you've got to build a web application firewall. There was one vendor who came into us and said, hey, you want to use our web application firewall? It's going to solve all your problems. I kind of tempered them. It's like, okay, tell me about it. Oh, we've got this fantastic throughput. It's absolutely brilliant. Look, here it is. We do this amount of throughput. Their throughput was 3% of my market open weight. So 97% of my customers could never have been able to log in. It's just crazy. You can't apply the same kind of skill set. And this is probably a little bit controversial, but when Paul sent me the invite to come and talk at this, one of the things I thought was fantastic about the invite was I don't want loads of cross-site scripting talks. They were brilliant, because it's so true. Everyone's just talking about cross-site scripting, new ways to do cross-site scripting. If you sit on the other side from a CISO and you care and you've got a big e-commerce infrastructure, the stuff you care about is the $1 trillion sat behind you, not the attack on the single one of your customer users. It's a harsh reality of life. I'm not saying that cross-site scripting is not a problem. I'm not saying that everyone should care about every one of their customers. Of course they could. But we've got to prioritize stuff in life, right? And the harsh reality for me about a decade into doing all of this stuff was sitting down with people and understanding that, security is a dim second cousin in many places to performance and functionality. And it's the reality, in my opinion. It's a sad reality. I would love to see it the other way around. But most developers care about functionality and performance first and security last. And they'll give you the argument that if the application doesn't have all the right functionality, no one's going to buy it, whether it's secure or insecure. It's a pretty tough argument to kind of counter, really. So, one of the things that drives me mad about the industry is I think there's a whole bunch of fantastic, highly talented people and security doing all this really interesting security research. And then you kind of follow BugTrack and you see, Johnny from hotmail.com, security researcher extraordinaire who publishes some bug in a PHP bulletin board, that probably gets used by him and his brother. And honestly, and it's like, geez, why send the friggin' thing to BugTrack and waste all the electrons? Holler over the fence, hey Dave, fix your friggin' code. It's like it would be a whole lot faster. And I think a lot of it is, it's like this 15 minutes of fame syndrome. And that's on a lot of the small stuff. Don't get me wrong, I'm not talking about the other stuff. One of the huge problems I see is a massive gap between what people will tell you have to do and what happens in the real world. So this is a beautiful, nice, clean architecture. Actually came from one of the vendors who produces web application firewalls. They have a lovely database at the back end. They have a lovely application server here. They have a nice little user interface so you can administer the application server. Put their firewall at the top, and they put all their nice little respondents. Let me ask you a quick poll. How many people have an application in their environment that looks like that? Not a single person, right? Most of them look like this. It's the reality of life, right? It's like, sure, I can easily build solutions for the first one, because I can go, I'm going to place my chips on this thing, right? But in reality, it looks like this. This is actually a real one. And this is a genuinely real one. Right? And that's what people have to figure out how to secure. That's the practicalities of life. So it's all very well if we say, okay, all you've got to do is put this piece here, and we're going to use Java messaging services for this, and we're going to do something else for that. In reality, these are the things that are running and things that are going to continue to run, and we have to learn to deal with them, and it's quite a problem. The ex-Anna Nicole Smith, I was told earlier. Yes, I completely forgot. So this is the thing about context. You had a few beers, you sat in the bar. How would you describe Anna Nicole Smith? No smutty answers. Any offers? Blonde. Bubbly, big, right? Blonde, bubbly, and big. It's a fantastic way to describe her. I think that's absolutely perfect. I'd also describe this as blonde, bubbly, and big. So it's all about context, isn't it? It's like, what's the context that you're describing it as being blonde, bubbly, and big? And I see a lot of people describe security requirements and the way that applications get built in the completely, utterly wrong context. Hopefully you'll describe Anna Nicole Smith in a different way from the lovely fat bastard. This absolutely utterly drives me insane. So I was going to talk here about PCI security, and I'll openly tell you what I was going to talk about, and I'll tell you kind of why I'm not doing it. So PCI has driven me mad for quite a long time. I think it's just fundamentally a flawed standard. And what I did is I built a web app. I actually took an intentionally broken web app. I refactored all the code. I reskinned it completely. I bought a nice, interesting URL to sell security books. I loaded all the content up with nice security books that you could buy online, including how to get PCI certified. I then paid $150 to a company who came along and certified the application for me as being secure. You could SQL inject the credit card database. Trivially. So I basically proved, in my opinion, that PCI is fundamentally flawed because of the business model that's around it. The business model is you can get certified for $150. No one is going to be able to do a decent level of security review for $150. So if I think about, the whole industry is kind of now just spinning out of control about regulations and compliance stuff, right? And I kind of tried to break it down to myself. I was in Chicago 2 weeks ago. I was walking past this photocopying shop, and they had like this nice big photocopier in the window, and it's like, it's going to solve all your compliance needs. And it's like, what the fuck is that about? It's like, what are you going to do? You're going to photocopy all the audit reports? Is that what they mean? I mean, literally, I just couldn't figure the thing out. So I spent some time, and I was like trying to rationalize what does actually compliance mean. And I think I kind of came to these things. So, you've got government regulations, we've got industry standards, so government regulations, stuff that's law in the local country, industry regulations, maybe it's the PCI type stuff, and then you've got marketing FUD. And I think that a lot of the products right now that are being sold, and a lot of people unfortunately are putting compliance programs in, is to comply with marketing, and not to comply with security standards. And it's kind of interesting. I did some touch points and went out to people and I said, why are you doing this compliance activity? Oh, I don't know, so-and-so said I had to do it. Oh, okay, go talk to him. It turns out half of it is actually driven by FUD stuff, right? And everyone, I'm sure, has seen the fantastic Dilbert cartoon, right? You can't do compliance. You can't spell compliance without lions, which is spot on. For those people who are not cryptographers, I'm sure you can figure out the 5-letter acronym at the top. I think that the standard is kind of pretty much like this. It's like a goldfish swimming around with a great big shark's fin on its back. And here's an example. It's like they give you a choice of taking an application firewall or having a security code review. It's like the two things are not. It's not like comparing an apple and an orange. How can you possibly say you can have either or? They also, say that you should have your vulnerabilities organized by an organization that specializes in application security. My wife's an accountant, but she specializes in application security because she does the bills at home. Literally. I mean, what's the definition of a specialist in application security? There's no test for who it is. And I know of many people that have just staffed up companies in the States based with graduates to pick up all the money. It's a real serious problem. I always kind of find this kind of amusing. So they reference the OWASP guide and they say that, authorization, every access to everything should always be properly authorized. If you actually want to go and download the PCI standard, don't bother signing the EULA, just go directly to the URL. It violates the standard that you're about to use, but... Did I actually say that? I think I did. This is from the OWASP guide as well. And what I often see, so people go, oh, it's great, we use the OWASP guide, it's brilliant. And I'm like, oh, okay, did you read it? And they're like, yeah, I read it. It's like, okay, did you know about this? This is a piece in the OWASP guide. It basically says, preferably, the application should have the ability to phone home to check for newer versions and alert system administrators when newer versions are possible. If that's not possible, then highly clears on to a phone home. So it's basically saying, you should put a back door into your applications. And then PCI is saying you should then use the OWASP guide. So basically anyone who runs credit cards should have a back door in according to the PCI. That seems ludicrous to me. So I can only account that people aren't actually reading this stuff, but they're just blindly implementing it. And I think that's a huge problem in the industry. Everyone's read Team America, right? I used to be able to do a good impression of him, but I haven't had enough beers. Everybody loves me. Security communities are fantastic. I mean, despite what I just said about OWASP, I think OWASP is brilliant. It's brilliant that all these communities get people together. It's absolutely fantastic. But what's starting to happen now is that people are getting together for the wrong reasons. It's not to share information and to do great things. People are getting together to drive to sell technology. And there are vendors getting together under the guise of building communities, and that's not actually what's happening. Yesterday there was this secure programming community that got together, and when you look at the people that are on it, there was a guy that I used to know who's basically a marketing department guy who's representing a security company who's never had a corporate security job, has no technical background whatsoever, and works in the marketing department. And he is helping drive the secure programming standard. Why? It's absolutely and utterly crazy. And so I see these things happening all the time, and I can only kind of really think that these things are basically cartels. They're not security councils. They use this wonderful term, the Security Council. And I guess kind of when I first thought, oh, that's a very official term. Like, I wonder who mandates them. You don't need to be anything to be a council, right? You can have Mark's Council. So I think before I go through this bit, I make sure that I'm really clear in kind of what I'm saying here is that tools are fantastic. Human evolution is based on people creating tools, right? From spades to dig in the ground to whatever. But I also think that the way a lot of people view tools right now is fundamentally wrong. So, any ideas on what's going to be on the next slide? A free beer to whoever gets to the next slide. Who said what?
A brain.
A brain?
Yes.
Oh, you get a free beer. It is. It's the best security tool in the world, and absolutely everyone has it. And a lot of people don't understand that and how powerful it is. In England, we have this phrase, like a fool with a tool is still a fool, and it's so true. The English we have what's called in America a potty mouth as well, right? So, does anyone know we have a bad phrase for someone? You call them a tool. So a tool with a tool is still a tool, right? But it's true, So if someone takes a really detailed technical security tool and goes and produces a bunch of work and says, hey, you need to go fix these issues, unless they understand the output, it's just absolutely meaningless, and they become fools. And that's a classic example of like what happened with this PCI app that I did. All they did is basically took an automated web app scanning tool, run it against my website. I know because I captured all the traffic. I know exactly which tool they did. I know exactly what checks they did. It didn't flag any checks. They say, okay, you're secure. They were fools. And used for people who run tools. Thanks. So if anyone's ever been to China, there's 280,000 graduates every single year who come out of school highly qualified, highly trained, to get paid about $150 a month. They're the people that are going to be running the tools in the future, right? It's not going to be highly skilled, highly trained people. That market's going to go away. It's the highly skilled interpretation of the information. The people running the web app scanning tools, I think that stuff's going to go away. The intelligent interpretation of the like immunity debugger stuff and the people who really know their stuff providing high value access, that's the stuff that's going to be great. And if we look at the stuff that's happening with offshoring, for instance, like tax accounting, preparation of tax accounting now gets done in Bangalore. And so it should do. That doesn't mean to say accounting jobs are going to go away. Accounting jobs, the people who do tax planning and all the high tactile stuff, the highly skilled accountants, are going to be more valuable than ever, but they're going to offshore the grunt work. And I think the same thing is going to happen with tools. I think this is Halo 2, not Halo 3. We have these things all around the office. It's pretty addictive. I usually get handed my ass by just about everyone who I play against, which is not necessarily fun. But if I look at the concept of security tools, I think that I was trying to rationalize why tools aren't that much more effective. But I guess it's partly because of the market, right? The market for these things is billions and billions of dollars. The market for security tools is still hundreds of millions of dollars, which means people can't invest as much money. But if you think about the sort of technology that goes into these things, it's absolutely and utterly unbelievable. So Bungie and Microsoft have now split, right? But up until that happened, at Bungie, the guy's still there. There's this guy called Randy Pagalian, and he's a psychologist. And what Randy's job is to do scientific experiments to find out what excites people when they play games. It's fantastic. He's got the best job in the world, I reckon. But he basically puts electrodes on people, watches them smile, sweat, all this stuff. So he knows when someone picks up a gun, he knows what's their reaction is. And he knows when people get frustrated because they can't kill certain monsters and things. So he's basically trying to figure out this genome of what makes game playing exciting. But I don't see the same kind of thing as why are certain people much better at finding security bugs? None of that stuff is happening. It's still kind of fairly crude. So I kind of think that we're still down here in this Space Invaders age, in terms of the security tools. What that means is there's a fantastic opportunity to build really good, very sophisticated tools. So I'm going to close now. I don't know what we're doing for time. I'm assuming we're getting late. It's dark outside. My beer is running out, warming up. So this is a true story. So for the Royal Holloway guy will probably know this because it probably got taught to him. So there used to be this guy this lecturer at Royal Holloway who is actually Austrian, but he's now lecturing at a university in Germany. And he used to start off a lecture about protocol analysis. And he used to tell this story about when he was younger, when he was on a train. And I always think it's a fantastic story because I think it's a really, really interesting way to describe the problem. He was a young man and he came out of a math department. And what they used to do, maths department, I've been living in America for too long, not a math department, maths department, mathematics. And so what they used to do is they used to have a whole bunch of recruiters, and they used to take these students up on a train into to the central city where they were, and the whole point was that these recruiters basically would find them really good jobs. These guys knew that they would basically get a really good job as long as the recruiter essentially kind of approved. So the recruiter would take them to the customer, basically make them do a dog and pony show, make their customer think they're really intelligent, give them a really difficult problem to solve, then they'll bring them back on the train. So, unlike America, most of these things are driven by beer, right? So they go up on the train on the way. The recruiter guys are thinking they're being really smart, and they turn around to these two students, treating them like complete and utter crap. And they go, watch this. The conductor's just coming down. They go, look, we've just got one ticket between the two of us. The two of them disappear into the toilet. As the conductor comes along, the conductor knocks on the door, goes, tickets please. They slide the one ticket under the door. They get away with buying one ticket. So they're coming back. These recruiters have put these guys through absolute hell during the day, basically treated them like complete and utter crap. And the recruiters are drinking their beer, getting a little bit sloshed. And they say, hey, look how clever we are. Look, we're going to do the same trick again, disappear off into to the thing. And the two students go, well, we can do that whole thing without any tickets whatsoever. And these guys are like, oh, God, what's going on? You've already done your dog and pony show. The two other guys disappear into one toilet, close the door behind them, waiting for the conductor to come. The two students disappear into the other toilet with no tickets. They open the door slowly, reach across the corridor, they go, tickets please! The guy slides the door underneath. The next thing you know, there's two recruiters caught on a train inside a man's toilet with no ticket. So the moral of the story is, if you want to figure out how protocols work, follow the path, right? And it was the best way he opened up how to analyze security protocols by following actually what happens and what the problems are in the step. So that's it from me. There are more beers. Happily questions if there are any. Heckles. There was no heckles. Is that because people were drinking beer?